There's a place on Earth where oxygen is so thin, even your thoughts start to slow down. Where the sky looks close enough to touch, yet every step forward could be your last. That place is K2. Unlike Everest, K2 doesn't care about fame, fortune, or flags. It doesn't welcome climbers, it tests them. Its slopes don't offer a path to glory. They offer a choice between humility and death. Over the years, hundreds have tried to reach its summit. Less than a few hundred succeeded. More than 80 never came back. And every one of their stories whispers the same warning. K2 doesn't kill you quickly. It waits for your mistakes. In this series, we uncover the real stories, some you may have heard, many you haven't, of climbers who dared to face the savage mountain. Some were professionals with decades of experience. Others were dreamers, chasing the kind of immortality only a viral post can give. But on K2, technology fails, oxygen freezes, and even the strongest hearts can break under the weight of a single wrong decision. This is not about judgment. It's about understanding why people keep going, when turning back might be the only thing that saves them. Because behind every tragedy on K2, there's a lesson buried in ice. So sit back, take a deep breath. You're about to climb through the thin air of ambition, ego, and survival. And before we start, if you believe stories like these deserve to be told with honesty and respect, hit subscribe to join us at K2 Stories, where every ascent has a price and every fall has a truth. Marcus Caldwell was the kind of climber sponsors loved, young, articulate, and obsessed with capturing every step of his adventure. He wasn't just climbing K2 for himself, he was climbing for the world to see. His gear list read like a tech magazine: multiple GoPros, a drone, and a custom-built helmet camera designed to withstand sub-zero temperatures. But there's a cruel irony about the mountain. The higher you go, the less anything man-made works. On July 26, 2022, Marcus and his small team reached the bottleneck, that infamous stretch of K2, where the mountain narrows into a deadly ice corridor beneath hanging seracs. Every climber knows this is where the mountain decides your fate. It's steep, it's unpredictable, and even a whisper of movement above can send tons of ice collapsing down. Marcus had trained for this. He'd read every manual, watched every tutorial. But the one thing he didn't plan for was what happens when you stop being a climber and start being a filmmaker. He was told to keep his gloves on, but the view, that golden sunrise cutting through the thin layer of mist over Pakistan, was irresistible. He unclipped one glove, reached for the drone remote, and began to record. At 35 degrees C, even the best batteries drain within minutes. Marcus's drone rose beautifully for 10 seconds before its screen went black. He tried restarting it. Nothing. Then he realized his right hand had gone completely numb. Frostbite sets in quietly, like a thief in the dark. He shouted to his partner, "Give me a minute. I just need one clean shot." But on K2, a minute can mean everything. When they found him later, his camera was still strapped to his helmet. The footage showed nothing heroic, just the slow spin of the horizon, the sound of heavy breathing, and finally, silence. Marcus's death wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost polite. A reminder that on the world's most dangerous mountain, distraction kills faster than altitude. Afterward, a veteran climber who'd been on the same route said, "He wasn't careless. He was trying to tell a story. But up here, the mountain doesn't care about stories. It only respects survival." That quote became a turning point in how the climbing community looked at content creators on extreme peaks. The debate grew. Should cameras even be allowed above 8,000 meters? Does documenting your climb make you braver or blind? Sherpas, who risk their lives setting ropes for others, had strong opinions too. One of them, Doria, said, "When you stop to film, someone behind you has to wait. And waiting at this height is waiting for death." That perspective rarely makes headlines. Sherpas are often the silent backbone of these expeditions, carrying loads twice their body weight, guiding in storms, and sometimes dying unnamed. Yet their warnings go unheard, drowned out by the hum of a camera. Experts later reviewed Marcus's footage frame by frame. His breathing pattern showed early signs of high-altitude pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs, likely caused by overexertion while filming. A simple pause, A slower pace could have saved him. But the truth is, Marcus didn't die because he was foolish. He died because he was human, caught between passion and pressure, between sharing a moment and surviving it. After his death, his footage went viral. Millions watched, most with admiration. But few realized what that final video really was. The story of a man who traded warmth for legacy. And if you listen closely to his last recording, as the wind howls across the microphone, you can almost hear the mountain whisper, "One frame too many." In memory of Marcus Caldwell and others like him, one climbing guide later said in an interview, "We climb to feel alive, but sometimes the camera makes us forget what that means." That's the paradox of modern mountaineering. The mountain hasn't changed, but we have. Technology made us believe we can control nature, capture it, even package it into content. But on K2, control is an illusion. And for every Marcus chasing the perfect shot, the mountain waits, patient, ancient, indifferent. Because up here, it doesn't matter what you film. What matters is whether you come back to watch it. If Marcus's death was a lesson in distraction, then Bobby Hale's was a lesson in pride. Bobby wasn't a rookie. He was 46, an experienced mountaineer from Colorado who had summited Denali, Aconcagua, and even Everest once, back in 2018. But K2 had haunted him for years. That one unclimbed peak on his list, the mountain he called unfinished business. He trained like a soldier. He ran stairs with a weighted pack, spent nights in hypoxic tents, memorized every crevasse of the Abruzzi route. But when Bobby arrived in Pakistan in the summer of 2021, the season was already turning unstable. High winds, poor visibility, and a worrying buildup of snow above Camp 4. The guides advised delaying the summit push by 24 hours. Bobby refused. "We've come too far. You wait, you lose your weather window," he said over the radio. And technically, he wasn't wrong. On K2, hesitation can kill momentum. But that day, hesitation might have saved his life. They began the ascent at 9:40 p.m., under a sky of freezing stars. The bottleneck loomed above, shadowed by a massive overhanging cornice, a frozen wave of snow that looked like it could collapse at any moment. Every step creaked, every sound echoed. Bobby was leading a small team of 3. Behind him was a young Norwegian climber, Soren, and a Sherpa named Lakpa, who'd already summited K2 twice. Lakpa's instincts screamed danger. "Too soft," he warned, hitting his ice axe into the snow. "It's not stable." But Bobby was laser-focused on one goal, the summit. As they climbed, the mountain began to shift. Tiny avalanches rolled down the slopes. The ropes groaned under tension. Then, at around 1:15 a.m., Lakpa saw something no climber ever wants to see, a fissure forming in the snow above the bottleneck. He shouted. The mountain answered with a thunderous crack. The cornice gave way, releasing a cascade of ice blocks the size of cars. Lakpa threw himself against the wall of ice, gripping his axe. Soren was swept away instantly. Bobby tried to anchor himself, but the snow under his crampons collapsed. In seconds, he vanished into the dark. The avalanche lasted less than 20 seconds. Silence followed, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound louder than the wind. Lakpa survived, half-buried, with a broken wrist and frostbitten face. He descended alone for 6 hours before reaching Camp 3, whispering only one word over the radio. Gone. Bobby's body was never found. But weeks later, climbers discovered a fragment of his red jacket halfway down the Black Pyramid, torn and frozen stiff, like a flag left by the wind. Back home in Colorado, his wife, Emily, refused to watch the footage of his final ascent. She said, "He used to tell me the mountain gives him peace, but I think what he really wanted was to prove something, maybe to himself, maybe to time." That line struck deep among other climbers, because Bobby wasn't reckless, he was relentless, and that's a thin line few recognize until it's too late. After his death, several expedition leaders reviewed weather reports from that week. Satellite data showed clear signs of instability in the snowpack, confirming that if Bobby's team had waited just 24 hours, the cornice might have already collapsed naturally, and the route would have been safe again. One meteorologist summed it up perfectly. K2 doesn't kill out of malice, it kills out of timing. That's the thing about pride on this mountain. It doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from love, a dangerous kind of love. The kind that blinds you to risk because the summit means too much. Mountaineering psychologist Dr. Harold Finnegan, who studied expedition behavior for over a decade, calls it summit fever fatigue. He explains, after weeks of deprivation, climbers enter a state of cognitive narrowing. All peripheral reasoning shuts down. The summit becomes a singular obsession, a mirage that consumes judgment. When Bobby radioed base camp one last time, his voice was calm. He said, "Visibility's poor, but I can see a glow up there. Feels close." That glow wasn't the summit. It was the reflection of moonlight off the overhanging ice, the same cornice that would collapse minutes later. Every year, rescue teams warn climbers not to underestimate the glow. But on K2, illusions are everywhere, in the air, the snow, and the mind. Bobby's story shook the climbing world not because of how he died, but because of how familiar it felt. Nearly every climber has faced that same whisper inside. Just a little higher, just a few more steps. And that whisper kills more people than any avalanche ever will. Today, Bobby A.'s name is carved into a small memorial stone near the Gilkey marker, among dozens of others who never made it back. If you visit K2's base camp, Sherpas sometimes stop there before their next ascent. They say a short prayer, not just for safety, but for humility. The one thing that saves more lives than ropes or oxygen ever could. And sometimes, in the early hours before dawn, when the wind is still and the stars shimmer over the mountain, climbers claim they can hear a faint voice carried through the valley. A voice saying, "It should have waited." Bobby Hale's story reminds us that courage isn't just moving forward. Sometimes it is knowing when to stop. And for every climber preparing to face the savage mountain again, his name is a warning carved into the wind. There are summits worth missing, if it means coming home. If Marcus's tragedy was about distraction, and Bobby's about pride, then Trevor Lang's story was about faith. Not in God, not in fate, but in technology. Trevor was an engineer from Manchester, a perfectionist by nature, the kind of man who could take apart a watch just to understand the way time moves. When he climbed, everything was calculated. Heart rate, oxygen saturation, temperature, altitude, all logged, monitored, and displayed on a wrist device that cost more than a car. He trusted numbers more than instincts, and that trust would prove fatal. Trevor joined a 2023 expedition on K2 led by a veteran Sherpa, Mingma Dorje. The team called themselves the Oxygen Efficiency Project. Their goal wasn't just to climb. It was to test new wearable tech that could predict altitude sickness before it became critical. It sounded brilliant. But there's a truth every high-altitude guide knows. Data doesn't breathe. The first days went smoothly. Trevor's readings were impeccable. Oxygen saturation in the 90s, pulse steady, altitude gain perfect. He sent cheerful video updates from each camp, ending every clip with his signature line. The body obeys when the data agrees. But K2 doesn't speak in data. It speaks in storms. By the time the team reached Camp 3, the air pressure dropped sharply. The devices started showing erratic numbers, battery drains, false readings, random beeps. Trevor shrugged it off. "It's just interference," he said, tightening the strap around his wrist. Mingma wasn't convinced. He'd seen this before, over-reliance on numbers. He told Trevor to rest another day, to let his body adjust naturally. Trevor smiled politely, but his mind was already made up. That night he climbed alone to Camp 4. It's a 600-meter climb through steep, icy terrain where every breath feels like swallowing glass. He checked his wrist every few minutes, reassuring himself that his vitals were within limits. But machines can lie, or worse, they can go silent. At 7,900 meters, Trevor's oxygen sensor froze. The screen went blank. The device had simply died in the cold. According to Mingma's later testimony, radio contact was lost around midnight. The next morning, other climbers reported seeing a single headlamp flickering erratically halfway between Camps 3 and 4. Then nothing. When the team reached him hours later, Trevor was sitting upright, still clipped to the fixed rope. His watch was flashing red, His oxygen mask had frost inside the valve. He'd stopped moving, but his eyes were open. The coroner's report later confirmed what Mingma suspected: high-altitude cerebral edema. The brain swelling caused confusion and hallucination. Trevor's tech had failed long before his body did. The tragedy wasn't that he didn't know. It was that he didn't feel. One of the guides, Pasang, said, "He kept saying, 'The numbers are fine,' but we could see he was dying." That sentence haunted the entire team, because it wasn't just Trevor's death. It was the death of a growing belief in the climbing world, that with enough technology, humans could outsmart the mountain. A few months later, at a mountaineering conference in Kathmandu, Mingma spoke publicly for the first time. His voice trembled when he said, "Machines are tools, not instincts. Up there, you don't need readings, you need respect." It wasn't a speech about blame, it was about balance, a word too often ignored by modern adventurers. Technology gives comfort, it gives control, but on K2, control is a myth. Your body is an experiment, your mind a fragile instrument, and your survival depends on an ancient rhythm that no device can calculate. Breath, rest, awareness. Trevor's story ignited an international debate. Should expeditions depend on advanced sensors, or should climbers return to the old ways? Slower ascents, longer acclimatization, human judgment first. A British newspaper called it the death of logic on the mountain. Others called it arrogance disguised as progress. But Mingma, the man who found Trevor, said something simpler. He didn't die because of the watch. He died because he forgot to listen to himself. Weeks later, a rescue team retrieved Trevor's wrist device. The data logs were intact. The last entry read, altitude, 8,123 hours pulse, 49 BPM. Oxygen saturation, 83% status, stable. That last line, stable, became infamous among climbers, a cruel reminder that no matter how advanced our machines become, they still can't measure human will. Trevor's family held a quiet memorial back in Manchester. His sister said during her eulogy, he believed in solving problems, but on K2 there was nothing to fix, only something to respect. Since then, many teams have changed their approach. Some still carry high-tech gear, but now guides like Mingma require climbers to log not just numbers, but feelings, fatigue level, dizziness, clarity. Because on the mountain, how you feel matters more than what your watch says. Trevor's final ascent is now studied in mountaineering courses as a cautionary tale, the first data-driven death on K2. But among climbers, his story means something deeper. It's a reminder that the summit doesn't belong to machines, or to data, or even to us. It belongs to the mountain. And sometimes the most advanced survival skill isn't calculation, it's humility. As one Sherpa said looking toward K2's icy ridges, he trusted numbers. We trust the mountain. One of us always loses. If Marcus's story was about distraction, Bobby's about pride, and Trevor's about misplaced faith, then Jake and Alex's tragedy was about speed, the modern disease of hurry. Jake Reynolds and Alex Meyer were childhood friends from Montana, both in their early 30s. They grew up climbing the Rockies together, filming their adventures, and chasing that next viral thrill. Their channel, Summit Junkies, had racked up over 2 million followers by 2024. Their content was fast-paced, full of humor, adrenaline, and near misses. They'd done ice climbs without ropes, paraglided off cliffs, and even surfed frozen waves in Iceland. But K2 was their final boss, the one climb that would seal their legacy, as Jake said in one interview. They didn't just want to climb K2, they wanted to break the record for the fastest ascent by a two-man team without supplemental oxygen, a ridiculous goal. And they knew it. But that was the point. The morning of July 19, 2024, they began their ascent from Camp 3 under perfect skies. Everything looked cinematic. GoPros mounted, music already pre-selected for the edit, their followers cheering them on through satellite comments. Their pace was brutal. Other climbers watched in disbelief as they passed Camp 4 in half the expected time. A Sherpa named Nuru later said, "They were moving like the air was normal. But it's not normal up there. The air kills." By 8,300 meters, Jake's breathing was ragged. The footage from his body cam later showed his lips turning blue, but he kept pushing. He radioed down, voice trembling. "We're 2 hours from the summit, we're good." They weren't. Above the bottleneck, the oxygen levels dropped below 40%. At that altitude, the human brain begins to starve. Hallucinations set in, coordination fades. Climbers call it the zone of forgetting. That's where Jake and Alex entered. At 8,550 meters, Alex stopped. His camera tilted sideways, showing nothing but sky. "I can't feel my legs," he muttered. Jake, delirious and exhausted, shouted back, "Don't stop! We're almost there!" He pushed forward, alone, reaching a ridge barely 60 meters from the summit. Then his camera fell. The last image it captured was his gloved hand, reaching into the air as the lens filled with snow. When rescuers found Alex the next day, he was sitting upright, back against a rock, still holding Jake's drone controller. The drone itself was found lodged in ice nearby. It had recorded everything. The footage was later analyzed frame by frame. It showed Jake collapsing near the summit, sliding several meters down, then lying motionless as the drone hovered above him. The battery ran out after 6 minutes. 6 minutes of silence. When the news broke, the internet erupted. Millions mourned. Some called them heroes. Others called them reckless. The debate grew ugly, but amid all the noise, a veteran climber named Reinhold Keller said something that silenced the argument. "Speed belongs to machines, not men. You can't rush a mountain that took millions of years to form." Jake and Alex's story wasn't unique in its tragedy, but it was unique in its cause. They weren't climbing against the mountain. They were climbing against time, attention spans, algorithms. That's the world we live in now, where even death can trend. Their families chose not to release the full footage, only a short tribute showing the two laughing at base camp before the climb. In it, Alex looks at the camera and says, "If we die, at least we'll die doing something worth remembering." That line went viral, again. But not the way they intended. After their deaths, a team of psychologists and sociologists studied the phenomenon of performance mountaineering. Their conclusion was chilling. For many modern climbers, the summit isn't the peak, it's the upload. They coined a term for it: Summit Syndrome 2.0, when the reward center of the brain, conditioned by digital validation, overrides the survival instinct. Even Mingma Dorje, the same Sherpa who found Trevor, was blunt about it. They didn't die on K2. They died on the internet before they left home. At the Gilkey Memorial, where climbers' names are carved into stones, a new marker now stands. Jake Reynolds and Alex Meyer, July 2024. Fastest ascent, never finished. Below it, someone added a quote in pencil, faded by wind. "The mountain doesn't care how fast you go, only if you return." In interviews afterward, older climbers spoke of slowing down, of bringing back the long expeditions, the shared tea at Camp 2, the patience that once defined the sport. A guide from Nepal said softly, "They climbed with the energy of youth, but mountains don't speak youth. They speak time." Time. That's the one thing no climber can conquer, and Jake and Alex's story, like so many before, proves that sometimes the greatest achievement isn't reaching the top. It is surviving long enough to tell the story. If you ever watch their early videos, before the fame, before the sponsorships, there's a clip where Jake and Alex are climbing a small frozen waterfall. Jake slips, laughs, and Alex catches him. Jake says, "You almost let me die." Alex laughs back, "Not today, man." Those words, in hindsight, feel heavier than the mountain itself. Because on K2, "not today" can turn into never again. They say K2 doesn't keep trophies. It keeps stories. The snow melts and freezes again. The wind erases footprints, but the echoes remain. Voices carried through the thin air of the death zone. If you listen long enough, you can almost hear them. Marcus's steady breath. Bobby's last laugh. Trevor's whisper for help. Jake and Alex's drone humming above the ridge. Every climber who falls on K2 becomes part of its weather. Their courage, their mistakes, their dreams, all woven into the mountain's skin. And maybe that's what K2 has been trying to say to us all along. That no summit is worth a soul. That the point of climbing isn't just to stand above the world, it is to understand your place within it. Decades ago, Reinhold Messner called K2 the savage mountain that tries to kill you. But maybe the truth is softer. Maybe it doesn't try to kill you. It simply shows you who you are when everything else is stripped away. Up there, there's no audience, no followers, no applause, just breath, and the question every climber must face. Why am I here? Some go for glory, some for redemption. Some, like Jake and Alex, just want to feel alive before the screen goes black. But K2 doesn't care about reasons. It only measures truth. When the storms clear and the sky burns orange over the Karakoram range, you can see the ridgelines glowing like scars, reminders of where ambition met eternity. And that's why we tell these stories. Not to glorify death, not to chase drama, but to remember the laughter before the climb, the courage in the wind, the fragile heartbeat beneath the down suit. Because maybe, just maybe, by remembering them, we give their final moments meaning. If you've been watching K2 Stories, you know this isn't just about mountains, it's about us. The human need to reach higher, even when it hurts. So if these stories move you, if they make you think twice before rushing into danger, if they make you feel something real in a world that scrolls too fast, then stay with us. There are more voices to be heard, more truths to uncover, more frozen souls still waiting to be remembered. Subscribe to K2 Stories. Because up there, on that silent mountain, the only thing louder than the wind is the story still waiting to be told.